Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cars Reading Skills Workshop with the Jack Westin MCAT podcasts. It's a pleasure, as always, to be joined by Jack Westin himself for this episode and for our series. In today's episode, we will be discussing the Cars Daily Passage from August 27th. It's called Tony Kushner. And as always, in our Cars Reading Skills workshops, we're going to go through this passage sentence by sentence and really discuss how students can read Cars passages effectively. Now, this is a pretty interesting passage, and it's one I think that we can learn a lot from. Jack, what do you think a student should be prepared to learn and engage with in today's episode?
Yeah. Hey, Molly. I think this is a very unique passage type that we haven't seen before, at least not
Mhm.
together,
Yeah.
where they're really sharing a story.
Yes.
And the problem with stories is if you're not interested, you can easily zone out, right?
Yeah.
And so I think this is great practice to stay focused no matter what the topic is, no matter what the story is or what is in front of you. You can always pick up something from each paragraph. My best advice whenever you're reading is go paragraph by paragraph. Don't overwhelm yourself thinking you need to focus on the entire passage. You don't.
Mhm.
Literally one paragraph at a time will help you conquer this passage. And so I think that's a good start for us. I mean, we could just jump into it. But the other thing I would keep track of is understanding what is an argument because there's a story inter mingled into the author's argument, right? And so we
Yeah.
need to understand the story, but also the arguments around the story. So that's something we'll definitely talk about.
Yeah, yeah, I'm excited. This is a pretty different type of passage. But we'll show, not tell, right? Let's go ahead and work into the passage itself. Um, and it's going to be kind of fun going through a different type of passage. So here's the first sentence of paragraph one. It says Tony Kushner's Angels in America exists in two parts: Millennium Approaches and Perestroika. Okay, so that's just a fact. I don't know what Angels in America is, but it's something created by Tony Kushner and it has two parts. These are the names. I imagine we'll probably hear some more about this, but that seems like just a fact to me.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know exactly what kind. Is it a book? Is it a
Yeah.
play? We don't know, but we do know it's a piece of work. It's a
Hmm.
piece of art in
Yeah.
some way because it's italicized. If it's
Hmm.
italicized, you should know, okay, this is some sort. That's what the MCAT does. It's
Yeah.
some sort of art that was created.
Hmm.
It could also be the name of a painting, right?
Hmm.
Okay, cool.
Or a book or a play or something. Yeah, it
Yeah,
could be anything. Yeah.
exactly.
Okay, next sentence says it follows a young man, Prior Walter, who, as he discovers he has AIDS, is abandoned by his lover, Luis, and struggles to find a way to endure and to live. Okay, so we still don't know if it's a book or presumably it's probably a book or a play rather than a painting since
Right.
we've got multiple actions happening and events. But we get our main character, Prior Walter, and we're starting to understand Walter's story.
Right. And this is the part where people go, I don't care about Walter. I just want to get a good grade. I just want to be a doctor. Why do I care? Why do I have to worry about this story? Right.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because the MCAT has asked you to. You signed up for this test, right? You signed up, you're paying $350. Most people are paying that to register for this exam. And they're telling you, okay, if you want to be a doctor, I want you to read 9 of these CARS passages, right? And so
Mhm.
the mentality that I believe we need to have when we go into this is open-minded. Open-minded. Hey, we're listening to a story, and this is actually sort of medical because it says Prior Walter has AIDS, right? And so that's a medical
Yeah.
issue. And so to some extent, we can just pay attention as if we're the physician, right? Understanding the story. So I think the best attitude is one of open-mindedness and one of embrace it, right? Just try to pay attention, try to focus on it. You should not take notes on this. They're not going to ask you about the specifics of the story, right? It's
Mhm.
probably going to be something more about the story, but you need to follow it to the best of your ability. You should not skim it. You should not skip it over. You can't, like, just because this sentence and probably the following sentences are not going to be the most important, right? They're probably not, they're just filling in context, doesn't mean that you shouldn't pay attention and that you should just lose track of it. No, we want to understand the whole story, right? And which
Yeah.
is, it seems a little complicated, right? I feel for Pryor.
Hmm.
So, okay.
Yeah. I love how how direct that is. You signed up for this.
Right.
Find
Yeah.
a way to have fun with it. Very, very profound, very direct. Okay, let's look at our third sentence. It's actually the last in paragraph one. So it says, along the way, Pryor becomes entangled with Mormonism. So Luis takes a Mormon lover, Joe Pitt, and we see a semicolon, but it seems like this is a list of ways that Pryor is becoming entangled with Mormonism.
Sure.
So I'm going to keep reading, right? So we see again, Luis with Joe Pitt. Joe's mother, Hannah, becomes Pryor's friend, another semicolon. And Pryor is visited by an angel who resembles the angel Moroni, who brought the Mormon scriptures to Joseph Smith. So we're getting a lot of, again, context about the story, but it seems like what I'm tracking and visualizing is there's some relationship between the story and Mormonism. It's also a pretty tangled, character web, right?
Yeah.
Your ex-lover's new lover's mom is your friend. Like
This should be like a
it's
episode on TV or something,
yeah, I mean, who
Yes,
knows?
yeah.
Maybe it is. Maybe it's a movie. It might be a show. I have no idea.
Right.
Um,
Right. I can't imagine your ex's lover's mother being your friend. Like
I know.
I can't think of. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
But okay, so it does get into something about religion. We don't need to know a lot about Mormon. It's just we need to know it's probably a religion, right?
Mm,
Um, and the angel Moroni, I don't know who that is, right? But
right.
it resembles someone of an angel type, right? Who brought the Mormon scriptures to Joseph Smith. Not sure who that is either, right? But that's okay. Like, let's just keep going and let's see what happens. But overall, we know there's a story, and we kind of understand the story to some extent. There seems to be something to do with religion tied to the story.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And
yeah.
we'll probably get an argument about the story to come.
Yes, and there's really no argument yet. This is all just context. And this is very different than what we've seen in the past, where the authors of those passages love to just present the argument up front, right? And
Hmm.
then expand on it later. This has nothing. This is just filler. This is just context for what lies ahead.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, let's take a look at paragraph number two. It says, it is worth then thinking more about Moroni and the religious traditions brought into the play by his citation. Okay, so now I'm personally I'm feeling a little bit of a shift. We're not just saying, "Hey, this is the story." We're saying it's worth expanding on Moroni and religion in this play. We also get that it's a play. So
Sure.
it seems like now we're going to really be focusing on religion in this play, Angels of America. That's a little bit more narrow than just this is the synopsis of the play itself. So
Great. Yeah.
that's something that I'm going to be looking for.
Yeah, kind of focuses us in, right? I mean, we know it's
Mhm.
a play. We know we're talking about the religious aspect of what's going on. Okay.
Mhm. Okay, let's take a look at our next sentence. As a religion, Mormonism is a product of American soil, and Kushner is clearly fascinated by it. So, Kushner, who's the author of the play, presumably, or director or something, um, Kushner is fascinated by Mormonism. Again, we know that we're analyzing Mormonism in this particular play, so he's fascinated by it.
Yeah.
We're
We
really
don't,
tying these things together.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's really an argument, whether I don't know if we're going to debate whether or not Kushner is fascinated by it or if there's a deeper
Mm,
argument. But
mhm.
the author is making this point,
Yeah.
right? We need to know, okay, who's saying this? Whose point is this? Okay, the author believes Mormonism, or Kushner's fascinated by Mormonism. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Right. Because we don't have a quote necessarily from Kushner yet. We don't have any support for that point. But again, Kushner is fascinated by Mormonism, something that we haven't officially mentioned. Um, okay, let's see what our next sentence brings. So it says, in interviews, he has said that the Book of Mormon is a work of 19th century American fiction on the same scale of similar works such as Moby Dick and Huckleberry Finn. Okay, so you don't have to know the plot and all the details of Moby Dick and Huckleberry Finn, or the Book of Mormon for that matter. But I would say Moby Dick and Huckleberry Finn are pretty much household names, right? A lot of people have at least heard of them. They know they're significant in a literary sense, right? They're like classics. So to say the Book of Mormon is on that same scale is promoting Book of Mormon in many ways, right? Because Moby Dick and Huckleberry Finn, again, you don't need to know all the details. You don't have to have read them, but they should at least sound familiar, right? These are pretty famous works.
Right.
Um, so the Book of Mormon is famous like that, basically. So we're tying Kushner with Mormonism. Same situation as before.
Right. So I think there's a couple things to take out away from this. Like you said, it's a great piece of work because Moby Dick and Huckleberry Finn, they're probably like classical books that
Mhm. They're
like really
famous. Yeah.
popular, really famous. But it's also fiction, right? I think
Hmm.
it's emphasizing that it's fiction.
Hmm.
I would, that doesn't sound so appealing when you say religion is fiction, right? A specific religion or group of religion is fiction. So I would just keep track of that as well, right? I would just,
Yeah.
I would understand it from that perspective. Now, who's saying this though?
This sounds like the author. Because
It's in interviews he has,
well, he has said that's
yeah,
true. It's not a quote, but it is summarizing. It's paraphrasing what he's said.
right. So it seems like this is Kushner's point, right? So
Mhm.
Kushner seems to be the reference to authority in this case.
Very
Uh,
true.
cool. Okay. So Kushner believes that the Book of Mormon is some sort of great work of 19th century fiction, essentially. Okay.
Hmm. Okay. He also said that it's, quote, theology is an American reworking of a Western tradition that is uniquely American. The notion of an uninhabited world in which it's possible to reinvent, end quote. Okay, so we've said the word American, I think 4 or 5 times, twice in this sentence, but in this paragraph as a whole, Mormonism is American, it's fascinating, and it has something to do with reinvention, it sounds like. Um,
Yeah, definitely themes that I would keep track of, right? American
mhm,
invention. Definitely, yeah. But overall, the argument is clear, right? The Book of
mhm.
Mormon is some sort of great lit fiction, right? And that's something Kushner believes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Um, all right, let's take a look at our third paragraph. It says the most interesting use of Mormon traditions in angels in America, however, lies in Prior Walter's unconscious imitation of the prophetic tradition exemplified by Mormonism's founder, Joseph Smith. Okay, this sentence should jump off the page for a couple reasons. One, we have however, right, which is one of our contrast words. This is going to shift the argument when we see it most often. And again, as we've mentioned in a couple podcasts, right? This is something that you want to pay attention to. Any of the arguments that come after that tend to be really important. But then we also see that this is the most interesting use of Mormon traditions in this play. So this is the most interesting. That's from the author's perspective. And we see, however, this point is important to understand, right? Walter is imitating a prophetic tradition, right? So some sort of prophecy. We know that Walter speaks with an angel. It's probably what we're talking about, but that's the most interesting connection between Mormonism and the play is Walter's imitation of prophetic tradition.
That's so like deep and it takes a second to register it, but I think you did an amazing job doing that because like this is I think the what we've been digging for. First
Hmm.
paragraph we're digging, we don't find anything. Second paragraph kind of takes us in the right direction because it's now telling us, hey, we're focused on the angels, the religion, hey, we're focused on just what Mormonism is, right? Like it's what like there, it's more specific or more focused than the first paragraph, right? But
Hmm.
here in this line, it gives it away. Like it tells us exactly what the author wants us to know. This is a very clear argument, right? Because
Yes.
we cannot go into Prior Walter's unconscious mind. We don't know if if really he's imitating prophetic tradition exemplified by Mormonism, right? And by the way, now it mentions who Mormonism's founder is, right? Joseph Smith.
Hmm.
So when I see Joseph Smith, I think, okay, that was mentioned in the first paragraph. I know who he is now, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so the idea here is really simple, but it's worded in a way that takes you a second to process it. So please take
Hmm.
your time and process it, right? Which is that basically Kushner's play makes use of Mormonism's prophetic traditions.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's all we need to know at this point.
Yeah. I'm really glad that we dug a little deeper in that sentence because it's so easy when you're reading Cars to be like, oh, that sentence was more complicated. It's not going to be important. But there are clues in this sentence that this sentence actually is important and it's worth pausing to make sure you understand. Um, so I'm glad that we took a second to break that down. I think it'll make things a lot more clear as we go through the passage.
Exactly. Yeah, it's weird because we're talking about an author's character and how that
Mhm.
character takes advantage of the prophetic tradition. Prophetic meaning like prophet, like a
Yeah.
prophet, someone every religion has a prophet pretty much, right? Where someone is a messenger, someone is sending the message. And so
Hmm.
in some way, Prior is engaged with a messenger, right? So
Hmm.
okay, so we got to see how this plays out.
Yeah. Okay, in 1823 in Palmyra, New York, the angel Moroni came to the young Smith saying that the last days were at hand and that Smith was to have a special mission to all nations. So this is Smith. This isn't Prior Walter. This is Smith. So now we're discussing the history of Mormon or Mormonism.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but okay, so the same, we were talking about Moroni, angels appearing. I know that the angel appeared for Prior Walter in the story, so maybe this is just expanding that they were similar. But it seems like context to me about Smith and Mormonism.
Right. If we want to understand Prior Walter's imitation, shouldn't we
Hmm.
understand what he's imitating? Right. And
Yes.
so this sentence is establishing the religion, right? Like what is the religion? What is going on with Joseph Smith? Right. And so it is kind of a detour, but I bet you whatever happened to Smith is going to happen to Prior in some way, right? Because Prior is imitating it in some way. So okay.
Mhm.
All right.
Okay, he was to dig up golden plates on which were written the revelations, supposedly in Egyptian, that translated by Smith would become the Book of Mormon. Okay, so again, context for the story, but since we've established that there's parallels between Prior Walter in the story with Joseph Smith's founding of Mormonism, we're establishing what's going on with Joseph Smith. So
Sounds
cool.
good. More info on
Yeah,
Joseph. Okay.
exactly. To aid him, Smith received the Urim and Thummim, spectacle-like devices, which helped with the work of translation. Okay, so just more context for the story.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. This story becomes fertile ground that Kushner could adopt. Hey, cool. We called back to the first sentence. And maybe if that wasn't perfectly clear, now it is, right? There's something about this story that Kushner adopts, right? Because again, Kushner's work, right, which has Prior Walter as a character, is similar to this founding story of Mormonism.
Yeah, perfect. And yeah, this is sort of an example, right? Like how it might actually be interjected into the story.
Yeah.
So just understanding Smith's visitation from from the angel and understanding the story could give you confidence. I wouldn't say it's going to give you points, but it's going to give you confidence for the other parts of the passage that you're going to read.
Yes,
Cool.
absolutely. Okay, well, let's take a look at the fourth paragraph. It says in Kushner's play, Pryor receives a revelation from an angel and is told to dig not in the earth near Palmyra, but under his kitchen floor to find the sacred scriptures.
Hmm. Okay.
The that's going to feel very similar, right? We have a
Yeah.
revelation from an angel, that's the same. Told to dig, that's the same. Different setting, but the same goal, find the scriptures.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty direct parallel in my eyes.
I see a repeating argument, right?
Yes.
Like I see like for me, I'm pretty much set on what the main idea is.
Yep.
Right. Like, because I've seen this argument play out in the previous paragraph and this paragraph. So I
Hmm.
bet you the main idea has something to do with how Mormonism is used,
In
like the
Kushner's
whole
play.
in the play, right? How
Hmm.
Mormonism's prophetic traditions are used. Okay,
Hmm.
let's keep going.
Yeah. Let's see. He receives as well a set of special spectacles, peepstones, to promote his visionary seeing. So another element that's the same, right? The spectacle-like devices with now a set of special spectacles to read things. Perfect. Another
Yeah,
similarity.
it's interesting because Mormonism as a religion is actually tied to the story, right? With
Mm,
Hannah, right? The mother. But it's also impacting prior in some other way, right? So it's like it's, I kind of see the connection there.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. As with Smith, Pryor's angelic revelations are preceded by a shaft of light entering his room. And like Smith, his vision eventually includes a ladder or conduit leading up to heaven. Okay, to me, the two things that stand out the most are as with Smith and like Smith, right? There's all this context, and of course, the whole passage is getting into this story. But as with Smith and like Smith, we are talking about the parallels. So we're continuing the argument in this whole fourth paragraph, right? The argument made in paragraph 3 that there's some parallel between Prior Walter in Kushner's story or play and Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So it's just paragraph 3 is explaining Smith's visitation with
Mm,
prophets, and in this or
with
angels,
the angel. Yeah.
excuse me. And in this paragraph, it's now just the imitation, right? Prior's engagement with the angels.
Yes.
So it's pretty straightforward, and it's what you were expecting, right? Okay,
Mm.
cool.
Okay, let's look at our fifth paragraph. These echoes of Mormon traditions are unmistakable, even though in interviews, Kushner has rightly insisted that the angel is not Smith's angel, but Pryor's, emphasizing the way in which various histories, narratives, and cultural templates inform Kushner's text, but are altered by it. So it seems like, we're hinting at some differences. The most recent argument was that we have imitation. I don't know that this is strong enough to say that this is brand new, right? But we're saying, okay, they are different angels. There's some slight differences. The Mormon template is informing the text, but is altered by it. It's not a carbon copy. It's not a Mormon story directly, but it's related to it.
Yeah, and this is a pretty difficult sentence to read, and I don't
That
feel like
too.
it's changing directions. I feel like it's
Exactly.
more of the author just elaborating and talking and conversating, right? But I think you
Hmm.
got the gist, right? That it's not exact, but it's similar enough.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Which is pretty similar to what we said before.
right,
We never said it was a carbon copy. Um,
exactly.
okay, our next sentence says Pryor does not follow in Smith's footsteps and obey his angel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I had the same reaction in my head. It's a lot shorter, a lot more direct. This is a concrete difference. Pryor doesn't follow the angel. So,
Interesting. Okay, so this is where they deviate, right?
hmm.
Still
Hmm.
imitating it in some way because there's an angel involved, right? But
Hmm.
it's not exactly the religion because Smith obeyed the angel. And in this case, I guess Pryor doesn't. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like whenever Cars Passages give either two parallel stories or two schools of thought or two people's work of art or whatever, anytime there are two related ideas, I feel like it's important to know how they're similar, but I think it's even more important to know how they're different.
Yeah, competing themes. A dichotomy.
Exactly.
Yeah, the MCAT loves spinning dichotomies and competing themes because one, it's easy to keep track of it. right? And I
Hmm.
think two, it shows that you understand what you're reading, right?
Yeah.
You can understand both sides.
Hmm.
And I think that's very similar to what you're going to do in medicine is you're going to come in as kind of a mediator trying to explain, one option versus another option, right? And
Yeah.
so I kind of see how it could kind of be helpful in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, prior doesn't have the same ending, does not follow the angel. I'm gonna track that in my head just because that's a difference. We want to make sure we understand how these things are similar, which we've established, but also different. Um, the next sentence says, in fact, he ultimately refuses her commands, returns the sacred tablets to heaven, and insists on a mission not fueled by a divine order. So we know that he doesn't obey his angel. Now we're getting the context of how he did respond. So again, not following what the angel suggested. So in this way, we deviate from Mormonism, and that's important to track.
Sounds good.
Okay, our last sentence in paragraph 5 says, in doing so, the play becomes prophetic itself. Okay, I feel like this sentence is a little more abstract. It's a little maybe less direct than the rest. I'm not sure where they're going by saying the play becomes a prophet or a prophetic, but I certainly am tracking how they're different, right? That prior does not follow what the angel says, right? Prior essentially rejects the angel. That's the difference. That I think is what I'm going to track from this paragraph.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, let's take a look at paragraph 6. This is our final paragraph of this passage. It says, something Hannah Pitt, the mother of Joe, tells Pryor when he's hospitalized provides an unusual and interesting perspective on the play's insistent angelology. Angelology.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Is
Okay.
that a word?
The study of angels, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, but angelology does not roll off the tongue super well. Okay, so again, Hannah's offering an interesting perspective on the play's insistent angelology as well as on Pryor's actions. So, okay, we're getting back into the story. It's kind of setting us back into paragraph 1. Hannah Pitt is talking to Joe when Joe's hospitalized. I don't know what she says, but it's something that's interesting. So I'm going to keep reading and see what she said. So Hannah connects angels to human desire. That one's pretty direct. Angels have something to do with human desire. It's not super concrete, right? Connect is kind of a vague term, but there's some relationship between angels and desire. We've been talking a lot about angels, so I'm going to see what do we have a quote? How are we going to communicate whatever the author is trying to get across here? It's not super concrete yet. The next sentence, it actually has a couple little mini sentences in it, but
Yeah.
it's all part of one quote. So I'm going to read it as one.
Yeah. Let's do
Um,
that.
it says, as she says, quote, our prophet, his desire made prayer, his prayer made an angel. The angel was real. I believe that, end quote. But Hannah's genealogy of angels undoes their sacred status. Okay, so we've got a quote from Hannah. This must be the unusual and interesting perspective. But to be honest with you, now that I've read the full sentence, that but Hannah's genealogy of angels undoes their sacred status, that jumps out at me so much more than the actual quote. Like that's the author's perspective that this is undoing, right? That
It's
angels
still
aren't sacred, basically, is kind of what it sounds like we're saying based on
Yeah,
Hannah's.
yeah. I mean, that definitely does say that, right? Angels undoes their sacred status, so they're not sacred. But even that is pretty complicated to
It
read.
is. It
It's not,
totally is.
I would say if you're at the last paragraph, expect two things to happen. Well, I would say three things. One is they're going to repeat the main idea. Two is they're going to summarize the entire passage. And three is they're going to go off a tangent, right? And they're going to just start to me, this sounds like a tangent, like they're going off here. And if that's the case, then okay, great. I might get a question about the last paragraph, I know where they discuss this stuff, I'm fine. But don't
Mhm.
feel like everything shifted and we're not on the right track anymore. Stay locked in and just try to figure out what the big picture of this paragraph is. And I don't think it's that obvious yet. All I know is that, Hannah's talking about angels.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was going to say. If you get a question about Hannah, it's probably this paragraph. But even angels we've talked about throughout the passage too. So we'll see. We've got another direct quote from Hannah, so I'm going to read it as one sentence. So, quote, an angel is just a belief with wings and arms that can carry you. It's not to be afraid of. If it lets you down, reject it. Seek for something new. End quote. This to me, the idea of, reject the angel, try something different, that just sounds like what's going on with Prior, right?
Yeah.
Like Prior rejected the angel. I mean,
Right.
this is Hannah's perspective, but it sounds like that's a difference from Mormonism, right? It sounds like
Right.
again, Prior can reject it. I don't know that that was always an option, but it is in this play.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, well, like you said, we might be going off on a tangent, but at least it feels like it's part of the same passage. I know sometimes we get a last paragraph and it feels like, did you grab this from a totally different work?
Yeah.
Like it feels so random.
This one actually, this last sentence you just read kind of connects it back to the last paragraph where Pryor does not follow in Smith's footsteps, right? 'Cause
Mhm.
Hannah, and it's so weird because we're talking about a religion and then we're talking about a play and how that play, interacts with the religion, right? How
Yeah.
similar it is to the religion. So we need to know when we're talking about the play and when we're talking about the religion itself.
Yes.
And that's where reading comprehension comes in. I don't think this is a really hard passage of arguments. Like the arguments are pretty straightforward and easy to understand. It's just keeping track of the names and what's who's part of the play and who's not. That is practice. That's reading comprehension practice. So if you're having trouble with that, keep reading a lot of theater, literature kinds of passages because they do a lot of this.
Yeah.
Um, okay.
Yeah. I always visualize it, and I've had this help a couple students in Cars Office Hours. I always visualize it as like I have two separate boxes, and I've put a label on one. This is actual Mormonism. This other label is the story. And it's like every new name, every new fact, I have to file into one of the two boxes. You just need to keep them separate in your head. And I feel that, or I found that that actually helps students, especially in or in passages that have a kind of dichotomy or two different situations or perspectives. Just file them into the proper box, and you'll be fine when you get to the questions.
That's right.
Um,
That's right. That's great.
yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Well, let's finish up. We only have two sentences left. It says that something new is Kushner's play. So cool. We've tied back, right? We kind of picked up on in the last sentence with the rejection, reject the angel. Yeah, that's an element in Kushner's play, right? Because that's what Pryor did. So makes sense. Um, and then he uses the imagery of Mormonism in order to interject the forms and styles of prophecy into his work. That sounds familiar.
Ooh,
We've come back to the main point here. Um,
hallelujah.
I know.
We're back to the main idea, right? The
Yeah.
idea from paragraph three.
Paragraph three.
And,
Yeah.
and I repeated in, paragraph 4 and 5, or mostly 4, not 5.
Yeah.
So
Four and
paragraph 3,
six.
4, and 6 essentially are going back to the same idea. I was not expecting that last sentence, but that
Me
kind of
either.
that kind of that, like I said, like it either goes to a summary, it goes to a new idea, which I was expecting, or in this case, it went back to the main idea because it literally says, basically they're using it Mormonism, right, in this work, this like, and it's specifically the prophecy stuff, right? The angels coming down and giving advice to whoever. So now there were differences, right? Like you should know that there was a difference with Smith's approach with
Mhm.
angels and Pryor's approach, which is clearly depicted in paragraph 5. But
Yes.
ultimately, that's the main idea, right? And that's going to help us answer a lot of questions.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So this passage we kind of waltzed around the main idea for a little while. We got there, we seemingly came, left it again, and now we're right back.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I feel like this passage is pretty different from the ones that we've done before, which says a lot because we've done quite a few of these episodes. But
Yeah.
that's the beauty of cars is that it's always something different. And I think it also really speaks to why it's so important to have a consistent set of strategies. You will have all different kinds of passages from authors with very different perspectives and very different tones. Of course, you know to expect different subject matters, but passages can be written in so many different ways, right? If you approach them in the same way, that's going to be your ticket to a high score in cars, and especially a consistent score in cars. You know, if you're seeing your score kind of ride a roller coaster, go up and down and up and down, it's consistency that we need, right? All types of passages can be adopted or read through with the same strategies. And if you don't believe us, go listen to a couple more episodes. Or come and see us in our free sessions, right? This is something that we love to talk about. And Jack, I love doing these episodes with you. It makes the week so much more fun to chat about cars.
I love it. I love it. And I hope everyone else that's practicing understands that, look, like this is a big deal, right? This test is a big deal, but you can
Mhm.
do this. You just have to embrace reading these kinds of passages and having an open mind and paying attention to the details, right? And if something
Exactly.
doesn't click, it will eventually if you keep reading. I think that's the
Yes.
message. That doesn't change whether it's this kind of passage or another kind of passage. It doesn't make a difference. So, yeah, happy studying, everyone.
Yes. Make sure, by the way, we will have the passage link if you'd like to look back over it later on, or if you'd like to try the questions, which we always encourage. We'll have the link to this particular question set in the description of the episode. If you're listening on August 27th, that's the daily for today. You could also find it on jackweston.com. But please, everyone, if you've made it to this point in our episode, please try the questions. Phenomenal practice. And you can really start to analyze how you're performing on those questions when you know you have a solid passage read behind you. So definitely give that a try. Happy studying, everyone. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Awesome.